This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
It's truly an honor and pleasure to deliver this podcast. I was just telling my guests that I have the coolest job in the world, and I do. I mean, it's been a long time coming. I just passed an important half birthday just a couple of days ago, and I realized that I'm at a space where I get to call myself experienced. I get to call myself wise. I get to call myself having lived a life. And one of the things that really is such a bonus of getting to be where I've now gotten is I get to meet these incredible people. And I get to meet them publicly such that I get to assist you or be with you as we explore what makes these people tick. We explore what makes them spectacular. We explore what makes them extraordinary. And normally the people that I'm interviewing don't see themselves necessarily as either spectacular or extraordinary. After all, they're just kind of making it through the day just like all of us do, waking up in the morning trying to figure out what it all means and which clothes to wear and who to call first and what are some of the chores or things that should have been done yesterday, all that stuff that we do every day. But who I get to interview are people who somehow actually have gotten that stuff at least enough in control that they're able to contribute significantly to the world around them. And that's really all we want to do, is not necessarily contribute to the world around us, but to be heard for what matters to us, to be given a space to be heard for what it is that we have to offer. And so today, it is my honor to introduce everyone, all my whole listenership, and maybe Ali's listenership as well, to Ali Bowen. And Ali was introduced to me. Ali becomes sort of a family of a friend of a friend of a friend or something, is how these connections get made. And if you think about it, that's normally how all connections get made. We sort of build a connection based on friends of friends of friends. You have a friend, and then your friend either likes you or doesn't like you. And if they like you, then they pass you on to their friends and which ones that you think you should know. And, it just explodes forward like that. So I have this tremendous group of people in my inner circle. And one of them is Ali's sister, and then Ali's sister's husband, who I just most recently had lunch with a couple weeks ago in Pismo Beach. And they both have been podcast guests. That's Mark Victor Hansen and Crystal Hansen. Ali is Crystal's sister. And Mark was like, oh, you need to have Ali on your show. And I'm like, consider it done. And Ali and I have had a number of conversations. So it's a beautiful opportunity to not only get to know Ali here today for what she's offering to the world, but also to have that be for you, my listeners, and you, Ali's listeners, as we carry on in a conversation that explores, Ali, your spectacular, extraordinary nature as a human. So welcome to Humanity, Ali.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Fred, for the amazing introduction. I appreciate it. It was very, very kind.
It's really true. It's how we get through the world, is counting on people around us being people who are giving us ways to get through the world. I know I have no chance getting through the world. None. I'm done getting through the world if I'm not surrounded by the powerful, the freaks of nature that I call my friends. I have the most powerful friends, starting with my wife and all the people, your sister, your sister's husband, and multiple other friends that I've been lucky enough to shoulder up with, or to grow with, or to consult with, or to cry with, or to explore with. And it really is the opportunity to contribute to humanity that drives me forward each and every day.
I live in a small community myself, and everybody's so helpful to each other. In fact, when I moved into my place, my neighbors came over and they introduced themselves right away and said, oh, do you need help hooking up your washer and dryer? Here, let us do it. And they did that, and they did a number of other things. And I just thought, we're so blessed to have each other in our lives, to have wonderful human beings in our lives. It does remind me of the English poet John Donne's statement that we are not an island unto ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we really do need each other. And I think this time more than any time is a time that we need to start reaching out to each other and not remain isolated and afraid to know each other and to help each other.
Well, these are trying times along those lines. And the truth is, Ali, even before the redirection that the entire world has been faced with, it's always been difficult. These always been difficult times. They just get a little bit more difficult. And it's always been great times because of all the things we've already pointed to. And it gets greater. It actually gets greater at the same time that it gets worse. They're almost dependent on each other. Like, it's amazingly great, and it's just horrendously horrible at the exact same time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes that so is I do think that across the centuries that people, as we, I don't know, become more evolved, we sink deeper into our spirit. And I think that when we start heading in that direction, that even when things are dark or things seem pretty dismal, when individuals are tapping into their light, right, their inner light, it helps to shine and radiate that beauty out into the world. I think one of the things is I see a lot of people who struggle with feelings and issues of self worth. And I've thought about this issue for a very, very long time. And for centuries, really, the upper power elite, regardless of what country somebody comes from, what political system or religious system they come from, this upper power elite has used the same strategy to keep us down and keep us feeling bad about ourselves. They just use different tools.
Mm-hmm.
So, like if we look at the Dark Ages or the medieval times, church clergy basically helped to rule the land, and they were in kind of cahoots with upper power elite structures at the time. Bishops were from very, very wealthy families, and they kept people illiterate. They would read the scriptures to them and tell them what God thought about them, and the things that they said God felt about them were not so good. Their interpretation was not very positive. And then you just keep going through the centuries, and like India, they have the caste system. In America, we have media, we have movies and social medias that tell us that we need to look like this and have this. And if we don't, then we're nothing. And in fact, sometimes I think if I brought people in from around the world, from different socioeconomic levels, from different races, different sexual orientation, different religions. And I asked them, how many of you have had low self-worth at some point, at least a dozen times during your life? I guarantee that every hand would go up.
Every hand, sure. I thought you were going to say a dozen times today, and that would still have it happen.
Right. And the thing is that sometimes we think we're so divided. Sometimes we think that we're so different from each other because we're from different countries, or we're from different political backgrounds, or from different religions. But the fact of the matter is we are so much alike, and we've all been part of this huge strategy that's walloped upon us. And the strategy is super powerful. If someone can make you feel bad about yourself, they can control you. If you knew the truth that you are part or a son or daughter of the highest, most powerful source in the universe, and as such have all the power and divinity and creativity within you to create the life that you want, then no one now has power to control you.
That's amazing and beautifully well said. Somehow it seems to me not only gather that up about yourself, but to emanate it such that it becomes possible for the people around you to live a life like that, almost vicariously. And then once it's vicarious, it becomes personalized. I really am me. I am me who is her.
Right. And that's one of the main things I help people really find is that self-worth again, right? Because when you were born into this world, I mean, you were a happy, joyful, loving, vulnerable baby full of love and acceptance, right?
Sure.
And
wasn't even an issue, right? It
wasn't even an issue. Right. So basically, I'm helping people return to the true essence of who they are, right? Back to that self-worth, back to that self-love, not ego love, but that very genuine, authentic love. Because as you said, Dr. Fred, when we start feeling that, right, we can emanate it and others start to feel that. And the beautiful thing is that when we shine our light, right, when that light comes from within, we give others the permission to shine theirs. And when we are shining that light, when we feel better about ourselves and love ourselves, we don't have the desire now to be mean and nasty and cruel to each other, right? We start to tap into the number one universal law, which is that we are all one, right? What happens to you does affect me.
Yeah.
What happens to someone across the globe does affect us, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all connected. And quantum physics has proven that so beautifully through what's called the ethers, right? Or plasma. But the ethers is the thing that when you are thinking about me, let's say, and all of a sudden I reach out and call you, we've connected through the ethers. We're connected.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Each and every one of us is really dealing with something, right? No matter whether we're tackling some of the big problems in the world or maybe even the tiny ones, we all face challenges. Now, I've been a psychiatrist for many years, and I've worked with all kinds of people from all walks of life. I've worked with more people than I can really count, from various backgrounds, dealing with more issues than you can imagine, of all sizes and shapes. So naturally, over time, I've developed a number of ways to assist others in gaining a new sense of freedom and empowerment. Now, I'm pulling back the curtain on one of those methodologies, and I'm going public, revealing the process and associated mindset that contributed to using this particular method with maximum effectiveness. It's all laid out in my new book called Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. You can pick this book up on Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback format. And as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I'd like to offer you a completely free copy in audiobook format. Just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative and download your free audiobook copy of Creative 8 today. I really look forward to hearing about your Creative 8 breakthrough. Now, let's get back to this amazing conversation. Welcome to humanity. So one of the things that you've already touched on that I think we owe our listeners to back up a little bit with is this idea of a question that I ask most of my guests, which is to get started, I let them know it's a grammatically correct 9-letter sentence that really brings forth a whole conversation pathway that we can drive in front of us. And in this case, I think it's worth backing up to that so that our listeners can know a little bit more about who it is that Dr. Fred's speaking with today. So the question really is, it's 9 letters. You may have heard of me say it before. And it really is, Ali Bowen, who are you? Who are you, really?
Oh, that's a very loaded question.
It is for sure. Sorry about that.
So no, it's good. Well, there's a story behind that actually, Dr. Fred. I grew up in a small town and in a religious community, a very conservative religious community, and I was very much a part of that, and it provided a lot of wonderful things for me. The only problem is I knew I was very different, and I ended up. It took me a long time, but I ended up at 29 coming out as gay. And as a result, I lost a lot of family members, friends, my church community. But previous to coming out, I had actually been teaching in that church. And I was teaching the adults and I was teaching attorneys and doctors and all sorts of things. And I was in my 20s. And I was studying very hard for those lessons because I didn't want to look foolish, right? If they asked a question, I wanted to be able to answer it somewhat intelligently. I had been running from myself, from the truth of myself, but I was very spiritual. As a kid, I was very spiritual. Well, aren't we all? I mean, to some extent, we are a spirit.
And we are all running away from ourselves.
Right. We distract ourselves, all that. And so I was doing a good job of running from myself. But one day I was working on a lesson and I was getting closer and closer. What I felt was just closer to that divine source. And I was reading something and all of a sudden it just struck me, which was this. I knew in that moment, something rose within me that I knew in that moment that if I didn't start living my authentic self, that this was the closest I was going to get to the divine, that my progress was going to be stopped right there. Because the truth of the matter is that when we get more spiritual, you have to become more authentic. You can't get closer to the divine until your authenticity expands, because the divine doesn't like a lack of truth, right? The divine doesn't like lies. The divine doesn't like that deception, right? And so I knew in that moment I had to come out. I had to stop running from who I was. And I just started sobbing because I knew what that meant for me. I knew that it meant that I was going to lose a lot of people in my life who wanted me to be something I wasn't. I really struggled for a few weeks with it, keeping it within. But I know that a lot of people in my life also knew that I was. They just didn't say that they knew. But so one day I decided that it was just too painful. I just thought, I'm just going to end my life because God's going to understand. I can't live not being who I am, and I can't live trying to be this other person, because if coming out means that I lose everybody and everything, then what kind of life is that? That's what was going through my mind.
Yeah, I got it.
And so I picked a particular day and I was ready to end my life. And I was sobbing really, really hard, and so hard that I heard ringing in my ears. I couldn't really hear much else. And I was alone, and it went from morning, and then I started to see the sun setting. And as I got ready to take my life, I had a spiritual experience occur. And I don't share that experience with many people because it is a very sacred thing to me. But I will say that in that moment, I knew that I was supposed to be who I am. And ironically, for the 6 months prior to my coming out to myself, I had been asking different leaders in the church I went to for blessings. So in the church I went to, they believe in the laying on of hands. And each person that I was going to was different people. The same sentence kept coming out, which was, God wants you to be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled with that. Well, what is that? How can I be who I am, right? Who I am is not who is accepted here. And yet that spiritual experience that night absolutely confirmed that I was to be who I am. And so there was about 6 years of incredible hell after coming out, because having to navigate that in my life as a 29-year-old at that time was very challenging, because I had friends that were established and family and a whole community. And now it was all changing. And so that valley, though, of hell was the greatest experience of my life, because it made me realize that nobody can take your relationship away from you that you have with the divine. And it also made me realize that spiritual truth is anything that helps a person be a more authentic, genuine, loving, kind human being. And that may come from your wise Aunt Sue. It may come from Some may come from a church, some may come from nature. Spiritual truth is all around us. We just have to listen and pay attention and allow ourselves to hear and be open to be touched in our souls. But sometimes we get so narrow and think that, gosh, Dr. Fred, if you don't agree with me, or you're not of the same religion I am, or you're not of the same political belief system I am, or whatever, then I can't listen to you and I can't hear what you're saying and all that. And it's very unfortunate, because there's so much that we have to teach each other.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, first of all, and we could just really stop there. The oratory that you just laid down is for the ages, so I just want to acknowledge that. It was
Oh, thank
simply
you.
beautiful, and including walking us through your vulnerable moments of your life at 29, and then for the 6 years after that. It seems like getting closer to the divine was one of the motivations here, that you got that in the duplicity or in the inauthentic self, in the hiding of self that you were living up until that point, this was going to be the best that they could offer you. This was going to be as close to the stage as your seat was ever. That lifestyle's fine, except it's going to leave you in the nosebleeder seats for the
Right,
concert. And if you
right.
want to get down to the main floor, the way you're going to have to do that is actually own who it is that you are. And everybody at the church is, God wants you to be who you are. And every one of us knows that. That's how we know when we're not dancing the dance of being who we are. We're very aware of that. We can really know when we're out of line with who we say we are, or who we say our belief system supports, or what we're aligned with. So there's this internal system that has us being uncomfortable when we are incongruent to our own authentic self. And that's what drives us to, we can reduce that discomfort by being more authentic. The variable here is in the world of inauthenticity. So there's an opportunity to step towards who you really are, get closer to the main stage, get closer to divinity, and then, like you said, have the cascade be that those around you have access to it as a result of being with you. And then I am me, who is the same as you, starts showing up. It seems like this is an access to living a higher life, living an optimized life, living a recontextualized life, one that actually matters. You get to be that for other people. Now, how to walk through this sort of complicated, absurd, ludicrous life that we have, in which we have to be certain ways in order to get certain things done that might not be entirely aligned with who we know ourselves to be. What kind of education should we pursue? What kind of occupation should we pursue? What kind of relationship should we pursue? What kind of things should we commit our life to? What kind of issues are important enough to take my attention away, to have it be something that I'm willing to put myself on the line for, maybe even put my whole life on the line for? Can you tell us a little bit about who you got to be? Because I'm looking at this bio you sent earlier, and there's some pretty cool stuff in here that ended up being little pathways that you took in order to support this person who is committed to being genuine, kind, loving, and authentic.
Sure. So I think part of running away from who I was, I think, was trying to please others. Okay. That was a big thing. And I was a great people pleaser. And the genuine part of that was I truly wanted people to be happy. But part of that was my dad was a very spiritual guy, but also very smart and had some vices as well, which made him a wonderful, well rounded character for sure.
Yeah.
But part of that was his intellect. And he and I would have many, many discussions about philosophical things. And I so desired to be like my dad in that way and be as smart as he was. Now I have never achieved that, but so I've stopped doing that, but I've given up on that, but I've just accepted, what I got. But I wanted to improve my intellect. I made school. I made that path, the path that I was going to run to. And boy, did it occupy me because when you're reading books and you're trying to get your degrees and you're writing and dealing with ideas and things, you can stay out of your heart a lot. You can be in your head a lot. And it was easier for me to be in my head during this time because when I sank back into my heart, that's where the inauthenticity would come up again, right? Like, hey, Allie, you're not being who you are. I ended up getting a degree in English and I taught at the university. And then I ended up getting another degree and taught in finance and worked with small businesses and helped them to grow. And just spent my time trying to make money doing those kind of things. But inside of me, what was always pushing as well was this desire to heal people, to help people. And so I took this fabulous course through Dr. Sears in Orange County, California, and became a master certified health and wellness coach and did that on the side. But that's what I really loved, what my passion was. I really loved helping people figure themselves out. And I think probably part of that is I was trying to figure myself out. And so it was easier to help someone else do that, right? But in our path of trying to do that, it kind of helps to heal ourselves in some ways. And so I did start doing some of that. And then there came a point where I moved to the Central Coast, met someone, was working 60, 70 hours, and my job helping the small business to grow. And I realized, what am I doing? I need to really jump into what my soul is telling me, right? That I need to start this healing and wellness practice. And so I only had 5 clients at the time in this area because I was working so much at my job, but I listened and I took the leap and I found a place that had where I could live and it had its own entrance for a treatment room. And I started and I've never had to advertise. I don't even have a website up yet, but it's being worked on and it's all been word of mouth and I've been totally booked since the day I opened. So what I want to share with our listeners is that when you said that sometimes there's such an incongruency between what society is saying that we need to do in order to make money and survive and all that kind of stuff, and what our souls or our heart really wants to do. And what I've discovered that if we have the courage enough to take that step, and you only have to take the first step. I didn't know what the other steps were. I just knew the first step, and that was to find a place, right? To have people come. So if you just take that first step, the other steps will come. But if we have that courage to do the thing in our heart, then you will, if you're authentic and genuine about it, you will be able to make money at it and be able to earn a living at it.
Yeah.
And I believe it's that thing deep inside of us that we don't have that plan for, that there's no manual for, is the thing we're supposed to do. And that we're supposed to figure out the manual. We're supposed to figure out the path. But it only takes one step. And then when we take that step, it's like we turn on the lights of the universe and our angels and our guides around us will say, hey, okay, you know what? I'll help you out now. Now that you're following your authentic course, now you can call in the powers of the universe.
Isn't that interesting? Really amazingly well said, actually. Now that you're following your authentic course, now the doors are open to call in the tools of the universe. These tools are far beyond anything that you could possibly imagine in anything that you're brought to this point. So when I'm authentic, the right people show up. Maybe that has to do with me and you right this very moment.
I believe it.
The more aligned I am with my true self, the gifts that happen from the outside are so extraordinary. And they're right here. They're like, yep, ask the universe from an authentic self standpoint, and you shall receive. Not only will you receive, you will receive 100x.
Yes. Yes, precisely.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, let me ask you about this. It doesn't seem so long ago where I would hear people talk like this and think, yeah, good for you. I'm glad that works for you. Yeah, I'm glad that you're blinded to the truth of an unjust world. I'm glad that you're one of those woo woo folks that's now connected to God or connected to angels and you feel like it's all going well. If you were living in my shoes, you'd see that life actually sucks. What's interesting about you, Ali, is you did see that, at least for a moment, you got down pretty darn low.
Hmm.
Your last moments were right in front of you. Okay, today's my day. Okay, all the things that I plan to take care of are taken care of. I'm out of here. I mean, this life isn't going to work for me. There's two questions here. The number one question I have about this is pain or misery or bouncing off the bottom sort of a requirement in order to get the natural universal support that's available when I now become authentic? Like, is it important for me to hit this high pain status? Your 6 years, or maybe you got to walk through the valley of death. You just do. It's just like part of it. It's almost unfortunate. People aren't getting where you and I are talking about without having had a pretty traumatic history, at least for an extended period of time.
Sure. And one thing I would say about that is that I do believe that pain can lead to our purpose. And I do believe that oftentimes it does if we allow it to. Now, what I mean by that is when we go through the shadow, through the darkness, through the hell, the valley of hell, we have a choice. One of two things. We can become bitter or we can become better.
Mm.
And I chose to use those experiences to become better. But again, the choice is ours. Now, I have such great empathy for the individuals that you just talked about, those who feel like, man, the world's unfair, nothing ever goes my way, all those kinds of things. And let me just share it briefly. Before I came out, I believed that I was hated, right? Because that was the message I got from my society. The world hates gays. And which is why I was so scared. I was so scared to come out. I was so scared to be who I was. And I bought into that victim mentality. And I say victim mentality because it made me feel like a victim. It made me feel like I wasn't able to reach the level that my soul, even at that time, desired. And what I discovered is that all of us at some point or another feel like a victim, right? And justly so. I mean, there are horrible things that happen in our lives, in people's lives, and at times we are the victim, right? But here's the difference is the choice whether you're going to stay in that victim mentality or you're going to rise above it. Because the truth is, and this is what our souls really know, and this is why I think our souls constantly work with the universe to bring experiences in our lives to try to shake us up and wake us up. Because the truth is that we're not victims, we're creators. We are part of that most powerful divine source of the whole universe. In us is that beautiful divinity, power, and light if we'll access it. But again, part of the strategy of the upper power elite is to make you feel bad, is to make you feel like a victim. Because if they can do that, then they can control you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When you start really seeing the truth of who you are and really grasping it, they can't control you. There's that scripture, right, that says basically, don't be concerned with those who can kill the body, be concerned with those who can kill the spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't let someone take your light. Don't let them steal your light. Don't let them extinguish your light. Your light is your greatest power. And it is still in you.
Mm-hmm.
But getting rid of that victim mentality is a super hard thing because what you have to do is you have to dive into the pain. You have to dive into the pain of where that story began.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to realize where that story is coming from and be able to start giving yourself self-love every day. Take an hour, feed your soul with
Mm-hmm.
podcasts like this, with things that uplift you, right? Get off the television. Start feeding your light. Because as you feed your light, it's like a dimmer switch. It's like pushing that dimmer switch up. Your light begins to increase. Your love will begin to increase. You will start to feel more connected. But as long as you feel like you have no power, then you have no power, right? And I was there. So I think for me, the universe, my spirit knew that I needed to be shaken to such a degree to wake up from that victim mentality, because for years I worked. I had my degrees, my graduate degrees, all that, and yet I was working for peanuts. I really was. For whatever reason, I was taking jobs that did not pay much money.
Well, maybe it's about self-worth. I mean, you were getting paid what you had yourself being worth.
Correct. And that's exactly right. Thank you. Yes, for underscoring that. Absolutely. I was getting paid what I believed I was worth, right? And I didn't believe I was worth much. I worked like crazy. I worked like a dog. I really did. And I just gave so much away for free, and so much of my time and energy and know how. And it wasn't until I got shaken up enough to get to that valley of death and almost take my life that I realized that I needed to be the light in me.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because who I was, when we start being authentically who we are and pulling out that dream inside of us, pulling out that desire inside of us, then that's when the magic really happens.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I notice that when I'm positioning myself as a listener for some of the declarations that you're making with authority, and you're making them, like me, by the way, you're making them with a knowledge base. This is a truth for you. This is not a let me try this out now and I'll let you know if it works kind of truth. This is a truth that's overriding and overarching all of life, not only your life, but life, the life of the trees behind you, the life of the mushrooms below you, the life of the cats and dogs that we spoke of, the life of the millennium that Earth has existed until now. There is an assurance that comes from that. And one of the things I'm trying to listen still from the listener who's out there thinking that life blows, already knowing that life blows, like, oh, here's another woo-woo person who found their way into being reborn or reconstructed. There's a religious twinge to what you're speaking to, just on the edge. This relationship with God, relationship with divinity, relationship with angels, relationship with church, relationship with your humanity and spirituality that at least abuts up to, I'm going to use the R word because I don't know how to avoid it, but I think that's interesting in itself too. We're going to say religion. I'm a former psychiatrist as of now, by the way, which I'm extremely excited to tell you about. If people used to walk into the emergency room and start talking about their relationship with God or Jesus or angels or clairvoyance or voices from the Lord or something like that, we just immediately hospitalize them as psychotic. Even if they looked great.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be like, oh, wow, that's so unacceptable in their present paradigm. There's only one thing we can do with you. And the general protocol, if we weren't thinking out of the box, would just take that person, sweep them up and put them in the hospital until they could start lying again that didn't happen.
Right. Well, and you bring up an important thing, right? So I grew up in religion, but I wouldn't say I'm religious. I'm definitely spiritual. But here's the thing. There's good and bad in everything. In religion, there's good there and there's not so good there. You don't have to find your spirituality necessarily in religion. It can be found in nature for you. It can be found in whatever feeds your soul, right? That light, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we want to get into science, so light is a frequency. It's the energy work I do. I basically increase the frequency of people's light, and that is science.
Let's go off the road a little bit because I think we haven't spent enough time. Just give us a little bit of the pragmatics of what it is that you actually do when you're doing that. What is your job? What do you really do?
So I use tuning forks, medicine drum, and sound bowls. And what I do, all of those have a certain hertz. In our chakras, which are energy centers in the body, right? Scientifically, they've shown they exist. Those are energy centers. Those energy centers actually have a frequency to them, right? So your root is C, right? The C note, and so on and so forth. And so what they've discovered is that not only do our chakras, right, have a note or a frequency, but our cells actually have a frequency. They make sounds. And what they've discovered is they're working on prototypes right now where these machines will go into the body and they can actually listen to see if your cells are in tune, because when your cells are in tune, they sound harmonious. They actually sound quite beautiful. When they're out of tune or diseased, they sound awful. And so this machine can pinpoint, they're working on a machine to pinpoint where those cells that are discordant are, because once they know that, then they can target the treatment just to that area rather than having to kill all the cells in your body, right? So what tuning does, what tuning forks does, and sound bowls and medicine drum, it gets your frequencies, okay, gets that frequency back into alignment, back in harmony to the true tune that you are. Now we talk about being who you are, right? The true tune of who we are. So when that happens, you feel pretty darn good.
Mm.
It increases the frequency in you,
Mhm.
and that frequency is the highest frequency is light.
Mm.
It increases the light in you, and when that light is increased, you feel better. Your body feels better, because what they've discovered is that when we go through trauma, when we go through emotions that are unprocessed, those things, if they're not worked out, if they're not processed, then they get stuck in the body and they create that out of tune, discordant sound in the body. And if it stays discordant or out of tune too long, it creates disease, ailments or disease. So, how I explain it to my clients is I tell them our bodies are meant to be in ease, in homeostasis. And when they're not, we call that dis-ease. And if we stay in dis-ease too long, it creates disease, right?
Yeah.
And so we used to think of a tumor as just this amazing solid mass. Wow, you can't change it. You got to cut it out, right? Well, the truth of the matter is now in quantum physics and discovering that, oh gosh, there's actually a lot of space in atoms. And when you can make space, you can get light in there. You can get frequency in there. And when you start putting harmonic frequency in that space, then guess what? Those cells can start healing, creating more space, creating more light, and eventually healing the ailment or the disease. So I know people may think, oh gosh, this is religious or whatever. Actually, it's very scientific as well.
Mhm.
So, our spiritual source and core, if you're a religious person or a spiritual person, it's very spiritual. If you're a scientific person, it's very scientific, And so it just depends on how you want to view it, but it's all part of the same coin. I also just want to go back just a little bit and say, for those who think that life really is the pits, and it can be, believe me, I was at a point in my life where I was so filled with hate at one point in my life because of the rejection that I received. So many people rejected me just for saying 3 letters, gay. I'm gay. 3 words, I am gay. And when that happens and you haven't done anything and you're still the same person that you've always been, but you are excluded from everything that you were once part of, and people don't like you just for that purpose and reason, and you start losing people that you thought would love you for the rest of your life, some anger and hatred really well up. And for about 2 years of that 6-year valley of hell, I was filled with such hate because it seemed so unjust to me that just by saying what I did, that it would create that much chaos and that much rejection, right, toward me. And so it came to the point where that hate was going to consume me, because you can't live a life full of hate. The only one it will end up poisoning is yourself. And that's what I began to realize. I was creating hatred has an energy. It's a very low energy. All words have an energy, a vibration. Hatred has a very low vibration. What people don't understand is the energy that you feel begets other energy.
Mhm.
It's just the way science works. It attracts that same energy. So you
Mhm.
may feel like the universe is against you, but what it is, it's the universe isn't against you. You are going against yourself, because when you hold on to hate or lack of forgiveness, now you're vibrating at a very low energy. You are guaranteed to attract more of that.
Interesting. Mhm.
And so I started to attract more of that.
Mhm.
And I came to discover it was affecting all my relationships, and I wasn't making friends very easily, and people really didn't want to be around me, and I needed to change. And that's when I started to shift back to the light. And for me, and this may be something different for other people, but I came to understand that I needed to forgive. That was a higher vibration and a frequency, and I needed that. And that forgiveness wasn't about the other person. It was about me. It was about saving me from the destruction that was happening, that the hate was creating in me. And one day I got on my knees and I was just like, someone help me. If you're listening, just help me. And I felt this understanding come through me that I can only explain as the light. And this way was provided in my mind of how to do this. And so what I did every morning, I pictured the person that I hated, and I imagined this tether being between us of hate and lack of forgiveness. And I would say every morning, I love you, I forgive you. And I would try to cut that tether. And until I had a physical release, either tears or just a weight being lifted off me, I knew I hadn't yet forgiven. So some people took me over a year to forgive. Some people, it was only a matter of a few days or a few weeks. And I noticed as I did that process that my countenance changed, literally, from being, I don't know, it was just more dim to being brighter. And it was just from the fact that I was forgiving people.
Yeah.
I started to become more beautiful, not so ugly. And I now believe that if people want the least expensive facelift, to start forgiving people and start to shine the light inside more.
Fantastic point, Ali. My wife recently commented on how great I look. And I'm not spending any more time with my clothes or my face or my beard, or not really more time. This was like, I need to tell you that you've never looked this good in your life. It's like, oh yeah, I get that. And what it is simple representation. This former psychiatrist is a part of it, for instance. And actually, Mark and Crystal, they'll be happy to hear that this happened in the last couple of weeks as well. And it's like, I don't have to give up that I was a psychiatrist.
No.
I've been a psychiatrist. That was in this life. That really happened. And not only was I a psychiatrist, I was an extraordinary and extensive psychiatrist. I was all over this map in psychiatry. But it isn't only about relinquishing who I am now as a former psychiatrist. It's about being aligned. It's about being authentic. It's about bringing my truth. It's about finding my tribe that way. It's about having a voice that is more aligned with myself rather than the duplicity.
Yes.
One of the things we share is that, and maybe we share it with 7.8 billion other people after all, is the idea that the duplicitous life is what leads to dis-ease, disease. It is living a life completely out of line with what you know is right and saying things that you know and everyone knows is not true or not true to who you know yourself to be. Living a life all day, every day like that, welcome to the valley of the shadow of death right there. Like, that's where you're going.
Right.
That's it.
Right. And it's funny you mentioned that because it's so true. In America, one of the most prescribed drugs is thyroid medication. And our thyroid is our throat chakra, right? And that throat chakra is all about speaking the truth. Our truth.
That is just remarkable. Give me a
Isn't it
second
amazing?
on that one. I love that. I had not heard anyone put that one together. Keep talking. That's beautiful. I love it.
Yep. And so when you don't speak your truth or you're not being truthful, your cells know it.
Sure.
Your body is so super intelligent and it is going to rebel. And part of the rebellion is your throat chakra is going to be off. And so what that means is you're going to likely have thyroid issues, maybe polyps in the throat issues. Now, and another thing too, addiction energetically is when the head and the heart are off. They're out of sync. And so you want to, in your heart, you feel something like who you really are, but your head's like, well, no, I have to please everybody else and I have to do this job that I hate and I don't want to change and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's your head and heart working against each other. When that happens, oftentimes you will want to stuff your throat chakra either with alcohol, drugs, or food. And in order to stop the messages, because we have the vagus nerve that travels from the brain all the way to the belly. So what we think in the head ends up in the body. And so if it's negative up in the head, it's negative in the body at some point, positive in the head, positive in the body. So individuals who go too long being out of sync in heart and head will likely develop some sort of addiction.
Amazing. It's really interesting. It seems like we're always driven towards some degree of balance. And when we're in balance, we have to reach for artificial rebalancers like food or drugs or alcohol. In other words, our essence knows that our heart and brain are not working together. They're not in tune with each other. And so we're not going to be good with that. We're still going to seek out a way for balance. There's an opportunity to get actually ultimately balance by being authentic with yourself and not by forgiving, for instance, giving as
Yes.
before, by speaking your truth, or at least not speaking an untruth, being aligned with your authentic, genuine self, being in tune. I work with a physical trainer who talks similar about what you're talking about, but he talks about it as misfiring. That when there's a space, like my hip is where I'm working on these days, my right hip. And I know that probably means
It does. That means something energetically, I could tell you.
it means all sorts of stuff. I know that it does. And I'm in tune now with what it means. You're unlikely to say very much that I haven't at least now rubbed up against, because I'm being honest at looking at what happened with my right hip. What's the deal with my life and my right hip?
Yep.
There's all sorts of stuff that's the deal with my life and my right hip. My right hip is owning the world. And as it now unfurls, it's uncoiling. I'm getting my right hip back. Someone like you could probably get that the effects of that
Yes.
would be beyond profound, like so extraordinary what happens as I get my right hip back.
Yes.
It's not because my hip was bad. It's because I had been living misaligned, or I had been living out of tune, or I had been living misfiring from the spiral or the linear nature of what was pre-hip and post-hip. And my hip has been owning that. My hip has been owning all of those energies for 63 and a half years. How would someone know that they should seek you out?
So if somebody feels just off, like they just feel like they can't access themselves anymore, or they feel like they've just lost the joy in their lives, that's a true indicator of misalignment, of what's going on inside of themselves. Or if people have body pain that they've gone to the doctor, they can't figure out what it is, they've done all the tests, nothing shows up, that's likely stuck energy that's causing and creating that pain. And that stuck energy is associated with emotions, with experiences, because our bodies are so super smart. Our cells remember every smell we've ever smelled. Our cells remember every memory. I mean, think about that. It's amazingly incredible.
It is amazingly
But
incredible. Yeah.
but what's so beautiful too is we're so super intelligent. What I love, Dr. Fred, and this is why you're just getting more beautiful, as your wife can see, is that you're starting to tap in to your own inner intelligence, your soul, and what your soul and your body, our souls speak through our bodies. And so your soul, your body knows what's in that right hip, right? And as you stated what it was, you're absolutely right, because that right hip is all about overthinking, overbusy, over accommodating, being what others want you to be, not necessarily what you are wanting to be. So you've hit the nail on the head. And that was just because you have been going within you to keep asking yourself, what's going on here? What is this from? And I think people sometimes, we've been socialized in a way where we're made to believe, oh, this pill will solve it for you. This easy thing will solve it for you. Look, healing is not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's worth it because your life will become the life you've always wanted it to
Yeah.
be when you truly heal.
Yeah.
Your body doesn't necessarily need a pill. It needs you to go within and start digging up the stuff that doesn't work anymore.
Isn't that great? It's just awesome. Ali, we could keep talking, and it really is a beautiful conversation. And I can tell it's a beautiful conversation because it actually feels like we've been doing this for about, 4 minutes. Totally lovely conversation. How does someone get in tune with Ali Bowen?
I do have someone who does my Instagram that we started just a few months ago, and it's at Ali, ALI, Health and AND Wellness on Instagram. My telephone number's there. I just have people text me. That's how they can get a hold of me. And I will have my website up in the near future. That will be alihealthandwellness.com. And that's the best way to get a hold of me. And also to Dr. Fred, you were asking people how they know if they need to, or if tuning would help them. It helps also with like ADHD, PTSD, depression, anxiety, things like that, things that they might have been diagnosed with.
Yeah, those
as well.
psychiatric diagnoses, those are nasty little psychiatric diagnoses. Pesky psychiatric diagnoses.
Yes, but there's hope. Yeah. Your bodies can heal. It's amazing.
It is amazing. All right. Is there anything else you want to say to our listeners, or me or you or your listeners before we depart here, Ali? It's really been great.
Yes, I just want to tell you, Dr. Fred, how grateful I am for you and just the wonderful human being that you are, and for inviting me on this show. And I'm so impressed by you, by your ability to just be open hearted, to to be curious about people, to be interested in people. I think that is such an important thing for all of us to remember. Let's stay interested and curious about people, right?
Yeah.
I would just want to thank the listeners also in just being so grateful for them and listening, and just wishing everyone the best. May everyone have what they need and the love that they need, and may they find who they are.
Beautiful. Awesome. Received, acknowledged, honored. Beautiful. Thank you.
Ditto.
And indeed, you are beautiful to the ears, and you're beautiful in the heart and your spirit. And it's really just wonderful to have met you and to have this conversation. So thank you so much, Ali Bowen, for being on Welcome to Humanity's podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Fred. And I feel the same about you. So namaste.
Namaste. All right. And namaste to you too, listeners. I don't think I've ever closed a Welcome to Humanity podcast with namaste. There's namaste and there's I love you, and both of them are here. And I do love you. And I think that Ali brings forth a good point, because if you're a listener who made it to this point in this conversation, that's because this stuff is actually resonating with you. And you could have tuned out. You could have gone anywhere. You could have gone and listened to Led Zeppelin. You could have gone and listened to kids screaming. You could have gone and listened to Mozart or whatever it was. But there was something in this conversation that resonated with you. And this conversation has been all about healing and all about alignment. So I invite you to take a peek at yourself and peek at where you're at, and look at ways that you might be out of line or might not have forgiven those who need to be forgiven, or maybe you're not speaking your whole and total truth, or maybe you're not being aligned with yourself. Because if that's the case, you do join this small group of 7.8 billion people who are not entirely aligned with who they say they are. It's been a pleasure again on this episode. Wishing you the very best and really hoping that you're off to something great. And if you're not, it's about to change. And if you are, that's probably about to change too. Welcome to Humanity. It's been a deep pleasure. Take care. Bye for now. We'll catch you on the flip side.
Hey, welcome to Humanity family. It's Ryan Levesque here, co-producer of the show. I truly hope you enjoyed Dr. Fred's in-depth conversation today. If you did, and if the conversations we share each week are making a difference for you, could you please take just a moment to leave a rating and a short review on Apple Podcasts? Your enthusiastic review helps new listeners discover the show. Your support here really does make a difference. I'd also like to invite you to reach out to a friend or two who would appreciate today's episode. Maybe shoot them a quick text or email, or maybe pick up the phone and invite them to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast so they can be enriched from the discovery of amazing ideas and insights each week. As always, you can find past episodes along with the complete show notes and links at welcometohumanity.net/podcast. If you'd like to explore how working one-on-one with Dr. Fred can help you break through whatever challenges you might be facing with your mental health or well-being, leading to new levels of freedom and vitality, I invite you to reach out to us directly by emailing Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net. That's DRFRED at welcometohumanity.net. Thanks so much for listening, and keep an ear out for another captivating conversation next week. Have a beautiful day, a beautiful week, and indeed, a beautiful life. Welcome to Humanity.